They said she didn't belong here. Not in this kitchen. Not in this part of Atlanta. And certainly not in a place where black women weren't considered equal in the culinary arts, let alone in the creative arts. When Jordan Ellis walked into Maison Vert, one of the most elite restaurants in the South, she looked nothing like someone their head chef would respect, let alone fear. She wore a simple white shirt, black cotton pants, and shoes that had seen too many 12-hour shifts. Her hair was neatly braided, and she wore no makeup or jewelry. She came without references or a resume littered with awards. She didn't need them. She introduced herself as J. Ellis, said she was looking for a job as a cook, and waited silently while the hostess looked at her skeptically. "We're all busy right now," the woman said until a call came from the kitchen that they were short-staffed. Then she was reluctantly sent away. When she walked through the open doors into the heart of Maison Vert's gleaming, steel-clad kitchen, she found herself in enemy territory. Standing in the center was Colton Reeves, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a perfectly ironed chef's jacket and a face that never smiled unless he was mocking someone. 44 years old, known for his ruthless efficiency and ego the size of a foie gras portion, Reeves had earned a reputation as a man who broke new chefs in a week. His kitchen ran like a military unit, precise, loud, and merciless. And he didn't like surprises. "Are you new?" he barked, looking her up and down. "Experience. A little professional training in Lyon," Jordan replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Worked in a few kitchens up north. Prep work, mostly." Reeves snorted. "Prep? You're in Atlanta now, sweetheart. This isn't a place to peel carrots for casseroles. If you cut yourself, it's your fault. You're on veggies today." Jordan nodded. "Yes, chef." No one asked her where she was from, and she didn't tell them. No one knew the name Jordan Ellis, not here, not anymore. And she was better off that way. They didn't know that she had once run Ciel Bleu in Paris, the fastest restaurant to earn 3 Michelin stars in Europe. They didn't know that her duck confit had brought a restaurant critic to tears. They didn't know that she had left 2 years ago and never looked back. She wasn't here to be recognized. She was here to watch, to listen, to see if joy could still live somewhere in the sound of a kitchen knife cutting mushrooms, in the aroma of shallots melting in oil. She was here to do research and to hide in plain sight. By noon, she had learned the rhythm of the kitchen. Reeves yelled, his sous chef repeated. The staff moved quickly, nervously. Mistakes weren't corrected, they were punished, publicly and sarcastically. It wasn't a kitchen, it was an ego pressure cooker. Reeves hovered over her as she sliced carrots with a brunoise. "Too soft. You're cooking like a soup chef." Jordan didn't respond, even when she used a technique she had learned from one of Japan's most respected kaiseki chefs, a technique Reeves couldn't understand. By midday, people in the kitchen began to notice that something was wrong. She was too quiet, too precise. She moved like someone who didn't need instructions, like someone who already knew everything. No one dared say it out loud, but something about Black's new assistant chef wasn't right. And Reeves? He wasn't done testing her yet. Tomorrow was the James Beard dinner, and Colton Reeves had a plan. By the start of the next day, the atmosphere at Maison Vert was tense. The kitchen was bustling with activity and preparation for the James Beard dinner. Tension permeated everything around them, the steel countertops, the sizzling pans, the sharp clang of knives against wood. The waiters moved with rehearsed precision, but under Reeves' command, no one breathed freely. "You." Reeves snapped, his voice cutting through the noise as he pointed to the other end of the kitchen. Jordan turned away from the cutting board and calmly wiped her hands on her apron. "We have a private table for VIP guests, one of whom has specifically requested Beef Wellington," he said loudly enough for all the chefs, dishwashers, and interns to hear. "Since you claim to know all the subtleties of French cuisine, you will prepare this dish." Everyone turned around. There was a pause, as if the kitchen itself had frozen. Jordan raised her eyebrow slightly. "Sir, I've never cooked your dish before." "Exactly," Reeves said, his voice tinged with contempt. "Let's see how your European education translates to a real kitchen. If you mess it up, you're fired." She noticed the look on Tarek's face, the sous chef who was passing by. He shook his head slightly. Whispering, but loud enough for her to hear, he said, "That's his signature dish. No one else touches it. He's setting you up." Jordan glanced at the laminated recipe card on the work table. Everything on it was textbook. Correct, but something was missing. The mushrooms were cremini, not wild. The dough technique was stiff, industrial. No nuance. No soul. She felt eyes on her. Now it wasn't just curiosity, but something colder. Reeves drew a line on the floured tile and made sure everyone saw which side she was standing on. The unspoken message was clear: you don't belong here. Jordan sighed slowly and nodded. Yes, boss. She moved quietly and precisely, gathering ingredients. First, she examined the fillets. The quality was acceptable, but not exceptional. Mushrooms, herbs, dough, spices. She noted every flaw, every opportunity. She wasn't here to prove anything. She was here to cook. And suddenly, the kitchen changed. The same woman who had been silently peeling potatoes and chopping shallots was now moving like someone who had written a plan. She held the knife like a violinist holds a bow, not cautiously, but with habit. Her movements were unhurried but not slow. Confident. Precise. Reeves stood nearby, arms crossed. Need help figuring out which end of the beef is which? No, thanks, Jordan replied evenly. Just assessing what I've got. Wellington isn't exactly soul food, he said loudly enough for the two chefs on the line to smirk. I hope you weren't raised on microwave cornbread. Jordan didn't flinch. But others did. Tarek grimaced. Lena, the pastry chef's assistant, looked away. Reeves grinned, relishing the moment. Jordan focused on the mushrooms, cutting them into cubes by sound and smell. She sautéed them in butter and added Amontillado, hidden deep in the pantry, instead of the tasteless white wine listed on Reeves's card. Then she added shallots, lightly caramelized, a pinch of rosemary, and finally lemon zest, all of which were missing from the official recipe. This isn't your grandmother's cooking, Reeves muttered behind her. No, Jordan replied calmly. Obviously not. He leaned closer and spoke quietly. This is my dish. You have no right to improve it. I'm not improving it, she said, keeping her eyes on the pan. I'm correcting it. That silenced him. The burners hissed and the pans clanged around them, but the center of gravity in the kitchen had shifted. Everyone could feel it. Something was happening, and it wasn't going to end the way Reeves thought it would. Over the next hour, the air in the Maison Vert kitchen filled with something unfamiliar, a sense of reverence. No one said it out loud, but the way the chefs slowed their movements to glance at Jordan's workstation, the way Tarek came closer and closer under the pretext of checking supplies, the way even the dishwashers leaned in slightly to peek, it was all obvious. The new girl, the line cook, was doing something unusual. Jordan wrapped the seared tenderloin in a thin layer of prosciutto, then added a mushroom duxelle that she transformed into something more like perfume than a paste. She didn't check the proportions. She didn't look at the card. She acted instinctively, from memory, from a language deeply ingrained in her bones. Every turn of the spatula, every movement of her hand was not the result of training, but of skill. She began assembling the Wellington with quiet confidence. She rolled out the puff pastry and cut it with surgical precision, then laid a lattice on top that none of them had ever seen before. She brushed it with egg and added a pinch of Malden sea salt. Every detail was executed with such calm intensity that it was like listening to a symphony without sound. Reeves walked by, trying to find anything to criticize. You're frying it too long. That piece inside will turn gray, he muttered. Without looking up, Jordan replied, I need another 20 seconds for the Maillard reaction. You'll see. He froze. The technical term struck him harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to object, but didn't. For the first time in 2 days, Colton Reeves couldn't think of a response. A strange silence enveloped her workspace, like a bubble in the chaos. The rest of the kitchen worked at its usual pace. Sauces simmered, side dishes sizzled, plates were passed and washed, but Jordan existed on a different frequency. Her body moved slowly. Her eyes didn't dart around. She didn't react to the kitchen. The kitchen reacted to her. Tarek leaned toward her again. Where did you learn to fold dough like that? Jordan smiled slightly. In the Loire Valley. In a small town not far from Angers. He blinked. You studied there? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Wellington, now completely wrapped and covered with a final layer of golden foil, lay on the counter like a sleeping sculpture. She checked the oven, without looking at the clock, and slipped it inside. Reeves leaned toward her. Aren't you going to keep an eye on it? I know when it'll be ready, she replied. 42 minutes at 400 degrees. It needs 38. The dough is thinner. Your refrigerator is colder. It matters. He stared at her. Not like before, not like a predator circling its prey, but like a man trying to understand something he no longer controlled. The other employees tried not to look at them, but the change was obvious. She was no longer a girl on probation. Now she was the standard. While the Wellington was baking, Jordan began preparing the sauce, a red wine sauce with roasted bone broth, a dash of port, and a knob of cold butter added at the end to give the sauce a velvety sheen that reflected the light like silk. She worked without unnecessary movements, without hesitation. Her movements required no instructions, only space. Tarek, watching her finish the side dish, carrots sautéed with maple syrup and thyme, turned to Reeves and lowered his voice. "She's not just a cook, chef. Look at how she holds the knife. How she smells the mirepoix before adding anything. How she checks the flavor. It's like..." "Like what?" Reeves asked sharply, though more softly than usual. Tarek hesitated. "Like a master of her craft." Reeves said nothing. Instead, he took out his phone and started typing her name into Google. 37 minutes after the Wellington was placed in the oven, Jordan approached it with calm confidence. She didn't look at the clock on the wall. She didn't need to. The smell told her everything. The dough had reached the perfect degree of caramelization. The internal temperature of the beef was exactly 128 degrees Fahrenheit, and during the rest period, it would rise to 132 degrees Fahrenheit, creating the perfect medium rare. She opened the oven door with one smooth motion. Reeves barked from across the kitchen, "You're taking it out too early." She didn't flinch. "No, chef. It's ready." "You can't know that," he snapped, stepping toward her and narrowing his eyes. She turned to face him, her voice now firm, authoritative, and unquestionable. "The dough has risen evenly. The fat from the prosciutto has melted completely without breaking the layers. The aroma indicates that the sugar has browned to perfection. The structure will hold. Let it rest for 7 minutes before slicing." Silence fell over the kitchen. Not because she had challenged him, but because of how she had done it. The voice that had been silent for 2 days now sounded with the unmistakable authority of someone who didn't just read cookbooks, but wrote them. She was no longer working under pressure. She was working on him. Reeves said nothing. He just looked at her, then at his phone, which was still open in his hand with her name in the search bar. He typed J. Ellis Chef, then paused. A result appeared. Then another. Then, a whole stream of them. He froze. He stared at the image slowly loading on the screen. A woman in white holding a copper ladle, surrounded by Parisian reporters in front of a glowing sign that read Seal Blue. Then came the name, Jordan Ellis. "Your name isn't just Jordan, is it?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Jordan stared at him, not looking away. "It's me. You ran Seal Blue," he said, his voice hollow. "You're the Jordan Ellis." There was a loud clatter as one of the new chefs dropped a tray of lamb chops. No one picked it up. Everyone in the kitchen turned to look at her. From the back rows came a stunned whisper. The New York Times called her Wellington a religious experience. Another voice. Didn't she win Cheval de Cuisine in France? The youngest ever. Jordan took off her apron, revealing a burn on her wrist, the same one that appeared in all the photos taken in the Paris kitchen. Chefs across Europe called this scar the Ellis mark. "I was on vacation," she replied simply. "But yes, that's me." Reeves paled. His jaw clenched. His reputation hung in the air like a blade ready to fall. "Why are you here?" he asked, almost spitting the words out. "To spy on me? To embarrass me?" Jordan raised an eyebrow. "I'm writing a book. I'm traveling to the best kitchens in the U.S., rediscovering what food is when it's not about stars or egos, but simply about nourishment." I applied anonymously. "You hired me." He swallowed hard. "You came into my kitchen under false pretenses." "I didn't lie," she interrupted. "I just didn't tell you what you didn't ask." Tarek, standing behind her, glanced at the Wellington. "May I?" he asked. Jordan nodded. With almost sacred reverence, he ran the knife through the dough. It didn't crumble. It didn't fall apart into pieces. It cut cleanly, revealing layers as symmetrical as a blueprint: tender pink filet, dark and rich mushroom duxelle, golden and crispy pastry, not soggy in the slightest. Someone whispered, "It's perfect." No one disagreed. Reeves looked at the piece, then at her. His voice trembled with disbelief and fear. "You humiliated me," he said. Jordan met his gaze, calm and unperturbed. "No," she replied. "You humiliated yourself." As the Wellington rested under a soft foil canopy and the aroma filled the steel kitchen with a warm, buttery smell, the atmosphere changed from tense to enthusiastic, although no one dared to say so out loud, not yet. Because the hierarchy was still barely standing, and Chef Colton Reeves, despite all his flaws and fury, still carried the weight of years, stars, and scars, but at that moment, that weight seemed fragile, as if it could break under the weight of the truth which had just been revealed on his own work table, that the woman he had ridiculed, humiliated, underestimated, and tried to break publicly was in fact an internationally renowned culinary architect whose name could end his career or elevate his kitchen to the pinnacle of fame in a single article. He said nothing as Jordan arranged the pieces on the plates, her movements efficient, elegant, based on rhythm rather than showmanship, and added the sauce she had been preparing for hours, carefully balancing the flavors, and finished the dish with a swirl of oil that glistened like lacquer and clinging to the plate like silk, and next to it, carrots glazed with maple syrup reflected a restraint that only an experienced artist could achieve, cooked until tender but not overcooked. Sweet but not cloying, fragrant but not overpowering. Before Reeves could come up with another defense, another accusation, another attempt to regain what was no longer his, the dining room doors flew open and Sylvia Tran, the floor manager, rushed into the kitchen, her face flushed with excitement, and announced, "Chef, the guests are asking about the Wellington. They say it's the best they've had in years, and a member of the James Beard Committee wants to meet the person who made it." The staff froze, glancing between Reeves and Jordan, and the silence suddenly became louder than the noise of the kitchen fans, louder than the sizzling of oil and the clanging of pots, because this moment would decide everything, not just a question of merit, but a question of character. Reeves opened his mouth, hesitated, clenched his jaw, pride battling exposure, reputation battling disgrace, and after a pause that seemed like an eternity, he muttered, "Miss Ellis made it." The words sounded like glass in his throat. And this admission cost him what he had not lost in many years, humility. Jordan, standing opposite him, simply nodded, not smugly or magnanimously, but calmly, reservedly, the way a master can accept applause without reveling in it. And then she turned to Sylvia and said, "Tell them it's the kitchen." Her voice was even, her eyes unmoving. "Tell them it was prepared by Chef Reeves and his team. It's his menu, his kitchen." Reeves looked at her as if she had just spoken in code, unable to comprehend the generosity in the face of betrayal, and asked, "Why are you doing this?" Jordan tilted her head slightly. "Because this isn't about ego," she said in a calm but firm tone. "This is about remembering why we started doing this in the first place." The kitchen around them changed again, not in movement, but in mood, as if a heavy weight had been lifted, and now the weight of perfection had been replaced by an atmosphere of freedom, freedom to breathe, to speak, to care, and when Reeves finally found his voice again, it was no longer sharp and commanding, but hoarse, worn, honest. "Could you?" he said, then hesitated, as if the words were painful. "Could you show me how you cooked the duck? The depth of flavor, the texture, it was exceptional." Jordan nodded. "Of course. Maybe you could show me how you fry the scallops I saw on your tasting menu. They were exquisite." And so, something unspoken passed between them, not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. She and Reeves stood side by side, with their sleeves rolled up and aprons tied around their waists, not posing, not competing, but teaching two chefs stripped of pretense, one rediscovering humility, the other offering grace without expectation. And their quiet technical conversation began to attract attention as they moved on to the components of the duck duxelle. Jordan explained the layers of umami, the need to bring the flavor to its peak before reducing, the choice of cognac over sherry. For a deeper resonance, each step backed by not only knowledge but intention, and Reeves listened, sincerely, occasionally interrupting with a question meant not to challenge, but to help understand. Then it was his turn, and he told her about his method of cooking scallops, the temperature of the steel pan, the exact moment to add the melted butter, how to determine the surface tension of the meat by sound rather than sight, and for the first time, Jordan smiled not just out of self-control, it was a genuine, relaxed smile of someone who remembered why all this was so important. The other chefs around them took notice. Tarek approached, followed by Lena and two junior chefs who had spent weeks trembling under Reeves' gaze and were now watching him discuss the shallot confit with a gentleness no one thought him capable of. And one by one they began to ask questions, at first small, respectful, but not timid, and Reeves did not respond sharply, did not brush them off, did not humiliate them, but answered with unexpected openness, correcting with care rather than contempt. And although his tone was still precise, the difference was undeniable. He was teaching. Within an hour, the walls of hierarchy had softened, turning into scaffolding where mistakes were not punished but instructive, where creativity was not seen as insubordination but as contribution, and Jordan, passing through it all, did not dominate the space, but elevated it, not with force, but with her presence, the clarity of her technique, and the modesty of her approach. And by the time service resumed, the kitchen was not just efficient, it was alive. Even Reeves, whose posture had always been rigid, had changed. His shoulders were relaxed, his expression less wary, and although he still carried the weight of his title, it no longer weighed on everyone around him. And when Jordan unasked adjusted the seasoning in one of his sauces, he simply tasted it, paused, then nodded and said, "You're right. That was needed." Beyond the kitchen doors, the dining room was filled with quiet joy, and no one suspected that something far more rare than a perfect Wellington was happening behind the scenes, a transformation not of ingredients, but of people. And when the last dish left the passageway and the waiters disappeared into the warm light of the dining room, Reeves turned to Jordan, rubbing his tired hand against the back of his head, and said, "I've been running this place for 6 years, and this is the first night I don't feel like I'm competing with someone for my job." "That's because," she said, looking out at the room through the glass, "for the first time in a long time, I wasn't proving that I could do something. I was just doing what I love."